thinking about what can I do to help my future self out, to prevent my future self from feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed. What can I do to just front load some of that work now to make sure that this week goes as smoothly as possible?
Welcome to the Red Print, your wellness podcast. My name is Daanish.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Neil. And today we're going to be talking about the top skills that you need to make the most out of university this year. And that's going to include how to not get overwhelmed and stay on top of all of your modules.
How to apply feedback without getting offended.
And how to become more assertive, so it helps you in your group work and throughout your life at university.
So today, what we are going to be talking about is thinking about top academic skills. So far we've spoken about what it's like to start university and just those real early experiences, first couple of weeks. Then we spoke about building relationships, and we spoke about the idea of how you go about meeting people. And today we're going to start thinking more about those skills, the harder skills, if you like, as opposed to the softer skills we've been talking about. The harder skills of what do you actually need to do to make sure that you stay on top of everything and that you stay on track? And what bits of information do you need to really listen to from your lecturers in those first few weeks? How are you both finding the start of the semester, guys? Are you enjoying it? Nice to be back.
You know, staff. Only joking. It's been lovely. It's lovely to be able to chat to students again and see students as well that I've taught before. That's like one of my favorite things in the world. So it's going well so far. What about you, Daanish?
So, I think I had a conversation yesterday, because the past year and a half was all online, not year and a half, previous year. And then coming back onto campus, it's like shifting everything around. You have to be locked in. You have to be focused because you have to get used to being on campus, get used to attending the lectures. But I think once you got into the habit of it, it's perfectly fine. Like for the first week, I was disorientated. I was like, oh, we're on campus now. So I had to make sure I look good, go onto campus, have a good time. But yeah, I think it's been actually great. Like being on campus and actually speaking face to face with the teachers, friends, everyone around you. It's a different feeling. And I think it's a better feeling personally.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're totally right. And coming back into the year, and whether it was coming back into the year from being more online to being face to face, or just coming back into a new year, it's always got that feeling of being overwhelming, and there being a lot of stuff just to remember. You know, summers are often very long anyway, a few months. So by the time you come back in, and for me, it's only by the time you get to about 2-3 weeks through the term that initial overwhelmness goes and something else sets in, and that's partly my routine I'm getting used to, and then I'm aware of that. Okay, now I need to skill up in terms of organization. I need to skill up in terms of my routine and just make sure that I'm actually making the most of things, rather than the first couple of weeks I'm almost just in that mode of, right, I need to get to this seminar and I need to get to this and I need to speak to these people, whereas now you think, okay, I know how to do all of that. What skills do I actually need? And the most common conversations that I've been having with students recently has been around keeping organized when you've got a load of new modules. Lots of students, they're going to have 4 brand new modules. So you're used to whatever you've studied last year, or if you were first year, whatever you studied in A levels, and you've got these 4 brand new modules, and thinking about the quick, smart ways of keeping organized so that you don't let everything pile on top of you. And that is a conversation that I've had time and time again in the last few weeks, and it's been really lovely to have. And there's a few little bits and pieces of advice that I've given and that I take myself. I'm curious to see, what do you both do? How do you keep yourself organized when everything feels quite heavy in the early start?
So the main thing I do is going to blow everyone's mind. You've probably never heard of it before, but it's called lists. So that's the main thing I do. Yeah.
I'm not familiar. Please can you break that down a little bit further?
Elaborate.
It's a bit technological, but I check everything on a list. I'll have like my personal tasks. I'll have my work tasks, I just check it all on a list, and I'm just constantly editing a list. Like I'll copy out a list, I'll cross things off it. So that's my main thing that I do, just because sometimes things pop into your head and you're like, oh, I need to do that. Oh, I need to remember to do that. And then I'll forget otherwise. So I have a list. But the other thing that I used, especially when I was at university, now I don't use it as much, but I used Evernote, which is like an app on your phone, on your computer. OneNote is the same. They're all kind of the same. But that was the thing that changed my life when it came to organization, because it meant that the thing that I struggled with was having some things on bits of paper, some things online, some things were like on a whiteboard that I couldn't take home with me. So I would just take pictures of everything and put them into folders on Evernote. And that helped me not lose anything. So that was the thing that really changed things for me. What about you, Daanish?
So for me, I'm very sporadic in terms of organization. As much as I love to say, yes, I'm better now than I once was. So for me, like on a Sunday, for example, I go through my whole week, like what I have to prepare for, what I suppose reading I have to do before I actually arrive in the seminar, and any notes I have to do. So for example, if there's a lecture pre-recorded, you have to watch it before you head to a lesson. I do that on the Sunday, because if I do it before I arrive, so let's say the same day, for example, it's very rushed. I'm not taking my time to make sure I understand all of the information. And then because I'm rushing it on the same day, I then have a whole day like crammed all together. And then that's my whole day gone, just going from A to B to C. Whereas if I spend time looking ahead on my schedule, so look at what you have for this week, next week, and maybe the next couple of weeks. So you're ahead of the curve, you're prepared, and you have your notebook all filled out with the notes. So when it comes to the actual tutorial or workshop, you have that structure already there. You're like, okay, this is going to be discussed, this is going to be discussed. And then if there's any questions that are going to be asked in the lectorial, I'm saying lectorial a lot because I have it, okay? So just answer the questions beforehand. Like, you don't have to give a detailed account, just make sure you understand what's going to be discussed, because if a teacher asks the question and expects an answer and then no one answers in the whole class for, let's say, 6 or 7 questions, that's not very fun for you or the teacher. So be prepared, look at what you have ahead of the curve, and through that you're going to realize you're saving yourself a headache. You can wake up and not be stressed. You'll be like, I know what I got to do and I can do it because you're prepared.
Love it. And I can confirm that experience of being in a seminar with no one talking. If you are the person, if you're listening to this and you are the person that says something in a seminar or answers a question in a lecture or just nods in a lecture, you don't know how valuable you are. And Daanish, you are one of these people, but you've got no idea, person listening, how valuable you are in those sessions. But yeah, and you also, it means that you take more in when you're actually in the sessions. It means you actually, you're not being bombarded with information when you're in there, and actually you've got a baseline of knowledge that you can then build on and ask questions and use that tutor for everything, and ask them questions about, okay, I wasn't sure about this. How can that be explained? After the seminar, if you don't do your reading until a week after the seminar, until the assessment time, those little moments for clarity are really gone. And the other thing that I liked, that what you said there, is that idea of pre-planning, and it's thinking about what can I do to help my future self out, to prevent my future self from feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed. What can I do to just front load some of that work now to make sure that this week goes as smoothly as possible? And I do a really similar thing. So my Friday, I've got a list. So I use the app Trello, and I map out every week. So every time, Rachel and I might be talking about something that we want to do in week 7. Okay, well, that goes into my little week 7 folder on Trello. And at the end of this week, on Friday, I will write into my diary exactly what needs to be done on every day. And that means when I wake up in the morning, I haven't got to make any decisions. I haven't got to wake up and go, right, what am I doing today? Where am I going to be? How am I going to do it? I'm just doing it. I'm just literally fulfilling tasks. And it's one of those things. If you read any books on habits of highly productive people, one of the main ones is about reducing the number of small decisions, and as simple as what you're going to have for breakfast, what you're going to wear that day, what's your to-do list, what's your timetable looking like, what do you have to prepare. Get all that done the week before, work out where you need to be, and it's just so much nicer. And it means that you sort of glide through life, as opposed to waking up and going, oh God, right, I've got this. Oh, that's at 10. I thought that was at that. It's so much nicer. And I think helping out yourself at a later date is quite an easy skill once you've got a good way of keeping organized. And like you say, Rachel, with things like Evernote, once you've got your strategy for keeping organized, you will find life so much more straightforward. And for people that also struggle with that and finding the time to do something, because I talk about these things, and I've done them for a long time. I haven't really, it's only the last couple of years where I've really started to put this into place more. And the other thing that I've started to do this year is also, alongside my timetable, my weekly timetable, is actually blocking out time to say, right, this is when I prepare for this module. This is when I do my lecture preparations. This is when, and I think, again, that's me saying, right, I've got particular work that gets done between 9 and 5. And if I actually block out that time, that means it has to get done then. So I don't think, oh, when would I like to do my seminar preparation? And then when it gets to that point, I think, oh no, I'm not really feeling inspired enough to do that seminar preparation now. Well, you're never going to feel inspired enough to do it. You're always going to find a reason not to do these things. Whereas if you actually put the time in and say, I'm going to do this thing now, I'm going to achieve it, you will get it done. So making yourself almost that optional timetable as well to keep yourself on track and to keep yourself organized is really, really helpful. Any other things that you would recommend as kind of quick, cheap, easy hacks for staying organized?
Okay, well, all I was going to say is my kind of top tip for this is, I think this is always my role in these conversations, I think, which is just being the downer, being the realistic person. So my advice is always, it's okay if you fall off the wagon with all of this. So I would always start out the year, I'd get some new highlighters, I'd get a new planner, I'd get all these things. And at the start of the year, I'd have all these plans for how I was going to do things, I was going to do everything in advance, and then it would kind of fall apart. And I think what can happen then is that you then bury your head in the sand, think, well, that didn't work. I'm never going to be organized. It's a pile of rubbish. What's the point in even trying? But instead, what I'd say is try your best with these tools and try and find out what works for you. But if they ever fall apart a bit, don't worry, just try and get back to it. And also rely on your friends and the people around you to also help you stay on track with being organized. But yeah, if you forget to do your prep one week, or if you lose track of what's going on, it is not the end of the world. And also try and be realistic with the goals that you set for yourself in terms of being organized. Because sometimes what can happen as well, which is what I'd always do at the start of every year, is I would sort of create a whole full-time job for myself, which is being organized and highlighting my calendar and things, and color coding my Outlook. So be realistic. And if it all goes wrong, don't worry, it's okay. Just do your best and try and get back into it.
I love the way your brain works, Rachel.
You're 100% right, because I feel like, is organization a skill? I'm going to say it's a skill, because you get better as you do it more and more. Like at the beginning, I remember first year, for example, I was given, those, what do they call those pinhole things you put into the cork board? I was given those to actually use. I didn't use them. Okay. So I just had them in my room for the entire year. I was given them. I didn't use them. Okay. And then now moving into final year, all I bought with me was just a pack of pens, because I know that's all I'm going to need, compared to first year where I bought several pens, pencils, rubbers, rulers, highlighters. Keep it simple, because as you go along in your time here at university, you'll find out what you need, because I know I need a highlighter because I did not get a highlighter. So over time, you develop yourself more and more, and as you become better and better, you understand how you work. You understand what works, what doesn't work. As Rachel said, you don't need to create a vision for yourself, but don't beat yourself up. Like, people get days wrong at a time. No one's perfect. No one gets every single day perfect. Just do as much as you can and pick yourself up. That's what life's about.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love the point you made as well about organisation being a skill. So are there any other skills at university that you think are like super important that people should try and work on this academic year?
So I'm going to go into the topic. I coughed. I apologize. It's not COVID. Okay, it's not COVID. Okay,
Good.
then
I was worrying about catching it over Zoom.
I blew in the mic. Okay, anyway, focus. So going on to assertiveness. You might not be thinking it's important. However, it delves into confidence, it delves into anxiousness, because my journey through university is, my first year I was very confident. Second year it was online, so I was kind of adapting to it all. And then in group work, for example, when you're trying to get your point across and you're anxious, you don't really think it's a valuable point. You just kind of let it slide. And then as you get further and further along, you let more things slide. And then at the end, when you get your mark, you're like, oh, it's an all right mark, but I know I could do better if I actually said what was on my mind. But this is actually what happened to me. I think it was maybe my first year. I was in a group project, and then I wasn't really saying my thoughts. I was kind of keeping them bottled up. And then as time went along, we got the feedback and then we acted on it. But I know as a group we could do better, but I kept that within me. And then we got given our marks at the end. It was average. We done well, but I know we could get maybe like 10, 20, 30 marks better, like get top level. However, because I remained within myself, I allowed my thoughts to stay in my mind instead of speaking them, I didn't get as great as a mark. It can even go into like meetings with your group. It can go into just day-to-day life. Being assertive is not about being aggressive. So I'm sure you guys have experienced in a meeting where there's that one person who just says, this is what we're doing, there's no other way around it. And they're trying to get their point across very, I suppose, as the word says, aggressive. They're not really listening to other people's opinions, ideas. Whereas I think being assertive is stating your opinion, honestly, for the betterment of the group, and not shutting down in line with the skill, not shutting down other people's opinions, listening to other people's opinions. Because when you're confident, you don't, I suppose, worry about what you're going to say is wrong. You're actually listening and speaking from the heart. You want the betterment of the people around you. You don't want to just shut them out, because with all of them listening to you and you speaking honestly, I think you can get a nice bond, a nice rapport with the people around you. You're not in your mind. And if you notice that there's some people in your group, in your class, that have good ideas but aren't very vocal, ask them, because 100% they can have an idea that will give you a great mark. It'll give you a great, I suppose, spark. So being assertive, once again, is not about tearing people's ideas down, listening to your voice solely. It's listening to others around you, speaking from the heart, being confident, because without it, you'll just stay within your head and not, I suppose, be your ideal self. You won't go towards the potential you know the group has, you have, if that makes sense.
Like, I know I come back to this thing as well, but for me, I find to be assertive, I also need to, because I spend a lot of time in my head. You know, that's where I'm comfortable there. I'm a natural introvert fundamentally. You know, I spend a lot of time in my inner world thinking about things. So for me, I find it very useful to not have a plan of what I'm going to say to someone when I'm being assertive, but thinking about, okay, well, what is the current situation? What is the status quo as we are at the moment? What are the things that are going well? What are the things that are going less well? Now, the tendency, when I'm feeling less assertive, the tendency is just basically to stop there, but focus on these ones, exactly like you're saying. You know, it's just to focus on what's going less well. Fine, that can do something. And that can start to help a situation, to start to increase communication. But I find for me as well, in those moments where I'm spending time in my inner world, is thinking about, well, what are some of the alternatives that I might see to that? So what are some of the solutions that I might think of? Am I completely lost from it, or are there some things that I might be thinking about? And using that just as a springboard for discussion, because you're so right that being assertive and having those conversations is about collaborative conversation as well. It's not just about you downloading something. It's not about someone else downloading something. It's about collaboration. And if I'm in a conversation with somebody, well, it's like any other conversation that we would have. If you're in a conversation with someone and someone says, I'm not keen on X, Y, Z thing, and here's what I would rather happen, here's a solution. Great, that actually begins a conversation, and that means that we're all on an even keel. It means that you don't have that feeling like, oh no, I'm being aggressive. Oh no, I don't want to offend someone. I don't want to say something wrong. No, you're just starting a conversation about how to do something differently. So for me, that pre-planning is quite important. Say, not to completely structure what I'm going to say and read a script out, but just thinking, where would I like this to go? And what are some of the ideas that I would like to kind of discuss out of it? How about you, Rachel?
I think that's a great point. And I also like Daanish's point really about sort of being yourself and getting to know other people, because I think that helps with being assertive too. As you were talking, it's really made me think, because I think this is something that I've struggled with in a few different ways. Like, it's something that I find it difficult to advocate for myself, or I have done in the past. In recent years, that's something like, it's seriously at one of the top of my to-do list. Like, it's something I am actively working on, is trying to advocate for myself more and be more assertive, because kind of my stepping stone was learning to advocate for other people and be assertive when sort of, pushing other people's views and kind of inviting other people in. But through practicing becoming more assertive, I know that there have been moments where I've probably come across as where it's gone wrong, and I've come across as like bossy or or aggressive. And I think, how we come across as well can be dependent on our race, our gender. And I think that a woman trying to be assertive can sometimes, to some people, come across as bossy, which isn't great. So always look out for that, everyone. But I think something that can help is building trust in relationships. So, I work with Neil a lot, and I feel that in our relationship, I can be assertive and I can be completely honest with my views and how I'm feeling, because there's so much trust there. So I think something that helps me is getting to know other people, building trust, and then I feel a little bit more comfortable in trying to be assertive, because I know that if I say something to Neil and it comes out the wrong way, he's not going to think, okay, Rachel's an awful human being. Like, he'll think, oh, she probably didn't mean it like that. She's probably just having a weird day. So I think Danish's point about kind of relationships, I think, is a really important one, and something that I think I find helpful.
It's interesting because we've talked about being assertive, and the idea there is that you are the one sort of doing the communicating, you are being assertive. And then the other skill we were going to look at was thinking about that idea of feedback and what it's like, getting feedback, and being assertive could involve giving someone constructive feedback. So what about getting constructive feedback? What would your thinking around that be?
Yeah, I think when I think of skills that I had to learn at university, getting feedback and understanding feedback was a really big one for me, because it took a while for me to realize what people meant. I felt like I had to kind of decode things, because a piece of feedback that I got a lot was too descriptive, and I would just think, why, it's not too descriptive, it's descriptive and it's correct. Like, where's the error? Everything I've written is correct. If this was my GCSEs or A levels, I'd be getting great marks right now. And I think that the way I responded to feedback kind of differed, whether it was written feedback, which I was getting in my essays, or whether it was in-person feedback. So written feedback, I think what tended to happen is that I didn't understand it, didn't ask for clarification, and then ended up dismissing it, especially early on in my academic journey. Then in-person feedback, I think, and feedback as well can be so subtle as well. You can get, it's just the response. If you give an answer in class, it could be someone's response or their face or the silence. And I think that especially early on, I would take anything personally. I would just think, well, clearly I'm a piece of rubbish. Like, I'm wrong. I'm horrific. My work is, is awful. And that is representative of me as a person, because obviously I am worthless. And I think one of the most important lessons that I learned throughout university is that your grades do not impact whether you're a good person or not. Whether you're, whether you give a good answer in class, you can give a wrong answer, you're still a valuable person, you're still a good person. It doesn't matter. These things aren't indicative of how good you are, but also even how clever you are, because we were talking about skills today. So much of what you do at university is about skills. And early on, I didn't have the skills to do an academic essay. So I was writing these descriptive essays, which would have got me a good mark earlier on in my education, but were getting me really poor marks. So my advice to any student who's going through that is be brave and ask the tutor, ask the person who marked it to clarify. It's not insulting. Whenever I've had a student actually come to me and be like, oh, what did you actually mean by this? I've loved being able to explain it to them, because when I'm marking, I'm sometimes wishing I could sort of write a million paragraphs and give more detail on what they could do. So having the opportunity to explain to them, I love it. So I wish that I'd done that. So I think it links to being assertive as well. So don't be scared to go to the person who marked it and say, what does it mean that I'm too descriptive? Like, what should I do about that? And they'll be able to offer you some advice on that. What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That opportunity to speak to people is just like gold dust. And I have exactly the same reaction when I get an email from someone. They say, oh, I'd like a little bit more, a bit more information on this. Fantastic, great. That's then the start of a conversation. And it's such a simple thing to be able to do. And every piece of work that you do, if we just take the formal points of feedback, that written feedback, every piece of work that you do gives you the opportunity to do it differently next time, or better next time, or in a new way next time. And making the most of those feedback opportunities is vital. And speaking to your tutors beforehand as well, and that's the nice thing when you're on campus. When you bump into your tutors in their office hours, or just before the session starts, or just afterwards, ask those small questions that you think, oh no, I shouldn't ask this because I'm going to sound silly if I ask it. Definitely ask those questions. We really like to hear them, because it's also a good sense check for us of, I have this all the time, is that people will ask me a small question that I'll think was clear because, I'd lecture on a module, I'd run the module. So as far as I'm concerned, it's clear. But actually, when someone asks me something, those smaller ones, that can then prompt me, maybe in the next lecture, I'll say that to everyone. It prompts me to remind me that there are certain small questions or certain small elements that we do need to decode. And those students who come and ask questions and seek more advice, they're also helping the rest of the cohort as well, because it's giving the tutors a real insight into student experience, which is great.
I agree 100%. You read my mind when you mentioned speaking to your teachers before the lessons, before your deadlines, before your assignments, and even after your feedback, because through that you're actually willing to change your approach to your assignments. And I presume as teachers, what am I looking for? As teachers, as students, as you ask for feedback, you become better and better. And as you gradually get closer to your assignments, you can even deliver an assignment you never knew possible, because you were going out of your way to actually ask for feedback, actually ask for help. Because I feel like, as I would like to say a first year, but even second years, third years, they might be afraid to ask for feedback, but don't be afraid of asking for feedback, because with that feedback, you're going to become even better. You're going to actually get a higher mark, which you deserve, because you're willing to go ask for help, put in the work to do such a great job. And then the teachers will help you because you're asking for help. You're actively searching for ways to become better at university. And if you have any questions about the assignments, just ask away, because it will clarify points that you never knew.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point. It reminds me as well of an idea which I found helpful, which I think a lot of you might have heard of, which is growth mindset. not thinking that a piece of work needs to be absolutely perfect straight away and everything you do needs to be perfect. And if you get some feedback or you look at something that's better, that means that you're doing it wrong or you're a piece of rubbish. But we're all in this kind of growth process. And it's good to get feedback, like you said, early on. Talk to your tutors, have conversations, and sort of check that you're understanding things, because that can help you get a little bit better and a little bit better, and eventually you'll sort of get to where you want to go. So try not to be sort of hard on yourself that you're not there yet. Think about, okay, what's the next little thing I can do just to get a little bit better? And try not to be intimidated by thinking, well, it's not good enough, I'm rubbish, let's give up.
Well, we have successfully covered, tick, 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 all of those particular skills that everybody needs for their early starts of university. And as the podcast goes on, we'll be sort of following that route and thinking, well, where are you in the semester? So we'll think about things about assessment and other sorts of skills, building in this even more about those skills about being organized, being assertive, and dealing with constructive criticism and feedback well. And we'll just be expanding those as time goes on, always with that common thread of wellness. But any final thoughts from everybody about things that you haven't said that you think, oh, that was a good little bit of advice, or anything to re-underline as a core point?
Well, I think I would just say across the board, for any of the skills we've talked about today, my number one piece of advice is just be kind to yourself. And I think that just works for everything. Be kind to yourself and everything will be a lot better. So that's all I've got to say.
Great advice.
My comment was similar. It spans across all three as well. I think don't be afraid of any situation at university, because we're only here for a limited amount of time when you think about it. Now I'm in final year, I realize I'm like, oh, I only have this year to do as much as I can, as much as I willingly can every day. So you might be in first year thinking you have loads of time. You might be in second year thinking you have loads of time. You might be in third year thinking you have loads of time. But don't look at it like that. Look at it as every single day, what can you do to become better? Ask for feedback, speak your mind, and actually plan your day accordingly. Because as you do that, you'll become closer and closer to whatever your goal is. So do as much as you can. Don't be afraid, and plan your day.
Fantastic. And I would say, just to pull both of those together, is that as long as you're concentrating on these things, and however successful you are in one period or another, consistency is the most important thing. And consistency doesn't mean, like you said before, Rachel, doesn't mean getting it right every single day, but it's just being consistent and showing up. And I don't just mean showing up, to attend, but showing up and just and putting that work in. And with all of it, you can never guarantee what mark you're going to get as a result of doing all of this, but you can guarantee that you would get a better mark than you would have done otherwise. If you do the things that we're talking about here, if you're taking those steps towards being organized, being assertive, and receiving feedback well, it is inevitable that you will perform better. There's no way that you would end up performing worse as a result of that. So these little bits, treat it as an experiment and figure out the ways that you work best. And tell us about your ideas, tell us about your advice, tell us about the particular things that you've helped, because that in turn will help other people as well to find out their particular methods as well. And while you're doing that, make sure you like this, comment, subscribe. If you find this useful in any way, go and tell one of your friends, go and tell 2 friends, go and tell 5 friends, but at least tell one person who might want to come and hang out with us on the Red Print, your wellness podcast.
Yeah.
All right, guys, it's been great fun. Lovely to see you, and we will speak in a couple of weeks for the next episode.
Peace.
Good to see you soon.
See ya.
Bye.